Alright, so the time has come for my top 10 favorite movies of 2012, and there are a couple of things to know before going into this. I haven't seen every movie that came out in 2012. I heard Silver Linings Playbook and Perks of Being a Wallflower are just fantastic movies, but I haven't seen them. So they won't be on this top 10 list. I'm not saying they would be on the top 10 list if I did see them, because we don't live in a parallel universe where I know the answer to that. And I won't see Zero Dark 30 until January, so technically it'll be a 2013 movie for me. And these are not reviews, nor are they objective. This is my top 10 list. If ever there's a time for a reviewer to give complete biased opinion, it's a top 10 list. That being said, let's get started.
Number 10.
Starting off at number 10 is Wreck-It Ralph. There's usually an animation somewhere near the bottom of the top 10 list. This year it's Wreck-It Ralph because I'm a big video game fanatic and Wreck-It Ralph was really just completely enjoyable. One could argue it's the best video game based movie out there. That's actually an animation that's not really based off a specific video game. Wreck-It Ralph paid homage to the video game classics of the 80s and 90s. Play their cards right, they could have a sweet franchise like Toy Story, but for games.
Number 9.
And coming in at number 9, this was the movie I was like, alright, if I can really help myself, this will be on my top 10 list, and it's Cabin in the Woods. Because Cabin in the Woods isn't really a horror movie, it's a movie that deconstructs horror movies to the bone marrow. If you're a fan of horror movies, or movies in general, you should at least check out Cabin in the Woods. Best of its kind, for sure.
Number 8.
Coming in at number 8 is Daniel Day-Lewis as President Lincoln. Lincoln was completely badass. It showed that Spielberg didn't get lost somewhere in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The guy can make really good personal movies. He showed that with War Horse, and he gave it to us again with Lincoln.
Number 7.
Now, I have a funny relationship with this movie. The first time I saw it, I was like, yeah, it was really good. Second time I saw it, I was like, yeah, this is great. And that's The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. To some people, the 48 frames a second effect really throws them off. Other people find it really engrossing. But the point is, even though The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey isn't as good as Lord of the Rings, the Lord of the Rings movies being my favorite movies of all time, very few movies are as good. But the negatives of The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey are completely eclipsed by the effect of going back to Middle Earth, which this movie does like a champ.
Number 6.
Coming in at number 6, Ben Affleck shows us, upon all the jokes about him in the 90s, now he's a really established director, and that is Argo. It is ludicrous that the story of Argo actually happened. That's just crazy to me. It's well acted, well directed, all around well executed. It's the most exciting movie where no one gets shot. Gotta admit, that's something.
Number 5.
Now we're at the top 5. This is where the heavy hitters start coming in. Coming in at number 5 is Skyfall. This is the Bond movie where they were like, alright, after decades upon decades of content and a few years of trying to reboot, we finally found the happy medium that's a great Bond movie that still has that dark, cinematic, realistic element that people are just going crazy over these days, but still has its Bond element. It was perfect in that sense.
Number 4.
Number 4 is the reason I'm actually getting you my top 10 now. I would have gotten it to you earlier, but I was like, there's still Django Unchained out there, and I think I need to see that before I make a top 10 list. And I'm completely glad I did. This is one of those movies that gets better and better the more you think about it. You just think about the dialogue and the shootout scenes and the concept and the acting, and you're like, yeah, Django Unchained is just what I love about Tarantino.
Number 3.
Coming in at number 3 was Marvel's like 5 to 6 year plan. We've seen it building to the Avengers for so long, and then it finally hits, and usually a movie like that would disappoint to no end, but the Avengers was completely badass. They got the perfect director, Joss Whedon, to have a plethora of characters and make them all relevant. All of that with having a good villain? Yeah, the Avengers is up there.
Number 2.
Number 2 and number 1, I flipped back and forth. I was like, alright, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 2, this is number 1. Number 2 was one of the coolest original sci-fis I've seen in the past decade, and that is Looper. I figured it'd be a simple Joseph Gordon-Levitt's going after Bruce Willis, he needs to kill him, the end. But it's not like that, it's actually a lot deeper than that. Some of the time elements you think about and you're like, oh wait, that doesn't really make sense, because, alright, time. They do a good job of being like, hey, stay on point, the movie's awesome, and you're like, oh yeah, it is, I'm gonna let all those weird time things that I'm thinking about that Star Trek taught me throughout the years go away because I enjoy Looper so much. And Looper had an awesome breakout performance from this kid actor in the movie it's a kid in a movie that's not annoying as shit. Never a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. That'll get you a few spots up, let alone number 2.
Number 1.
And you haven't seen it on my top 10 list yet, so either you're thinking to yourself, wait, that's not on the top 10 list at all, or it's just going to naturally be number 1. And number 1 is The Dark Knight Rises. Yep, my fanboyism is completely showing at this point, but I don't care, it's my top 10 list. And as it is a completely non-objective top 10 list of what I loved most this year, it's Batman. I loved the villain. I thought Anne Hathaway was great as Catwoman. I loved the lesson behind it, which is like, oh yeah, you want to fix your city? Sweet, you're gonna totally destroy yourself doing it. I've seen that in a couple movies before, but The Dark Knight Rises was a great concluding chapter chapter to a great trilogy.
The Hunt for Red October!
When you can understand every word in this movie and not need subtitles to do it, you just feel accomplished and you feel obligated to put it as your number one. That's not why, really, but I'm just saying. The movie has its conveniences, absolutely, but I think most any movie on this list does. I'm just saying it doesn't change the fact that when I think of the movie of 2012, I'm going to think of The Dark Knight Rises. In that, The Dark Knight Rises, number one for me. Alright, so those are my top 10 favorite movies of 2012, and yes, for every top 10 best list, there is a top 10 worst list. That's coming to you. Probably be a little easier than a top 10 list, because there were so many good movies this year. This is easily the most difficult top 10 movie list I've done yet. If there's a person out there who hasn't done their top 10 movie list yet, it's because they have a list of movies with scribbles and cliff notes and arrows, and they're just like, I don't know, this could easily be a top 15 list. 2012 was definitely the best year of movies that has happened since I've been doing YouTube videos. And so now it's in your hands, my friends. What are your top 10 favorite movies of 2012? Make a list, put it below, or make a video and put it as a video response. However you do it, I'd love to hear from you. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.